Hey there, hope you're doing okay today. I think we've got all the audio issues figured out, maybe. So we'll see as we get live here. But I'd love to know if things seem okay from your end, and we can kind of go from there. I do want to jump in here in just a second. This is kind of the second half of chapter 4 on data structures, which are objects and arrays. Welcome, Fuzzy. Good to see you. Good to see you again, Carl. You asked about Resend. Basically, I've had an existing relationship with them, mostly just by meeting their CEO, and then we became friends of sort. And so, I just feel lucky to work there. To tell you the truth, I don't feel like I just feel lucky. So, all right, well, we'll get started here in just a second. Let me switch stuff over, and I think now you can hear me. The music was loud for a second, but I think it's right now. Let me know if I got that wrong. Okay. I do want to mention I have had the last 4 years now. I've raised funds for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and normally I have like 38 to 40 people who give and send me their receipt. This year I've got like 37 prizes. I think maybe it's 47, and I think it's 37. I only have 12 people who've sent me their receipt, which means for most of these things I'm not going to be giving them away. So I'll just return them to the companies, which is a little awkward. But I know it's been a hard year for a lot of people financially, so I totally understand that. But for some reason you're watching this and you're like, oh, I could give $5. You would win one of these. All right, I'm going to give it away Friday. The cutoff date is tomorrow. So there's no way I'm going to get 27 people or whatever to give between now and then. So if any of these seem interesting to you, you can even just say, hey, I only want to be entered in for Get Tower, and you would win it. Consulog, or Consul Ninja, Dracula, Get Tower, Mux, Neon, Quokka, Vercel, Wallaby, Warp, all these are available to people who give at least $5. And St. Jude basically is on a mission to help eradicate childhood cancer and other life-threatening diseases. And they do that through not only researching things themselves, but sharing that research all over the globe and sharing their expertise. They're often on calls with doctors in other countries because they're the experts, and that's part of the mission of St. Jude. And the best thing is nobody who gets treated at St. Jude ever pays a dime, because their motivation is not to make money. It's to really cure cancer and these life-threatening diseases. So I'd love to have you join me and send me your receipt. Again, it's $5 at least, and you'll be entered to win one of these items. And you can opt out of things you don't want. So if any of these seem interesting to you, even on just like a purely like, hey, that would be nice to get, don't worry about giving only $5. I'd rather give some of these things away than just have to tell companies, I didn't have anybody to give them to this year. So next year, maybe I'll like lower how many items I get. I don't know. I was trying to base it off what we've done in the past. And even though we didn't bring in, like we brought in more last year, but this year we didn't bring in as much. We brought in more this year. We had more givers in 2023. So just trying to kind of figure out how to, best partner with St. Jude. I don't get anything for this. It's just literally something I like to use the channel for. So, hey, welcome. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into data structures. And here we are over here. Hopefully everything is working. Let me know if audio sounds off or anything like that. And you can see the link to donate down below if you'd like to donate. Okay, I'm going to assume everything is working because people seem quiet, so we're going to assume that's the case. And let's jump right in. Okay, so over here we've got, actually, let me make sure I can actually see the stream issues if there are any. And then we'll jump straight in. Okay, cool. All right, over this way then, we cut off some more around immutability. And as I actually looked through this, like I said, the last couple of streams, I said, hey, I really want to be looking through this ahead of time. Well, now I am. And so when I was looking through all this, I realized like basically they're telling the story and they're focusing on methods that are available in arrays and in objects. And while like I don't pretend I'm smarter than the authors of this, the author of this book, I do think that it ends up getting kind of overly mathy. And most developers don't first start with math. They first start with wanting to solve problems, and then they realize, oh, I kind of need to understand some more math to do this. So this whole like log thing they get into, which is where we stopped last time, is basically walking through like how do you statistically tell the correlation between this and that, which I'm not saying is you never would do, but I think it's kind of like it's more about math and less about JavaScript itself. And if they want you to just learn methods, I want to just show you methods. So that's kind of what I'm going to do today is we'll look at objects and arrays and their methods, or properties. I think they even get to strings as well. We're going to get into higher order functions, I think next time. And so we'll kind of be in this space for a little bit. But all they're saying is basically like you have a function here where you're going to push certain items into here. And the first thing they're talking about here is with objects, sometimes you'll have the value and the like name of that value, the variable that you're assigning it to within that object. It's probably not the right way to say that, but like right over here, maybe you have class 1 and this is just called class 1 or something like that. Whenever things are the exact same, you can actually just assign them like their singular name. So that's not making much sense. Let me give you an example. So let's say we have like this thing right here. We have this, it's called like food, all right? And this is an array of strings, bananas, and then we have like muffins. I don't know why. Okay, so we have those two items. And then I have like my food or my preferences, whatever. And then this is an object. So maybe it's like, first of all, let's talk about my name. So my name is Chris. And then, oops. This is not how you do objects. Sorry. And then let's say you have food. Well, you can do two things here. You can say food references food, but that's a little verbose. So what you can do in JavaScript is if it's the same, like the variable that I'm assigning to this name is the same, right? I can just collapse it like this. I can just say food and it's the exact same thing. So that's all they're saying. So if I come over here, you'll notice they have events and events inside of an object. That's the important part. If they're inside of an object, you can name them the same thing. But if we look down here, what they actually end up evaluating to is this array, which evidently this events is, coming out of whatever item like we're looping through. And so it's an array of items. That's the events. And then squirrel is just referencing whether it's true or false. Frankly, there's like naming conventions. I would definitely call this is a squirrel because I'm not going to remember what squirrel means, right? But is squirrel is like, okay, that's a true or false. Okay, is it a squirrel? That's what we're saying. So now I know this is a Boolean, and I don't know what this is just by the name, but I know it involves many things because it is events, right? Two things. So that's all they're saying here, which is very true. All right, and like I said, they're going to basically get into a bunch of math about like the coefficient and like how close things are. And like, again, you might do this kind of stuff, but like this is way too, in my opinion, way too advanced for like when you're first starting to learn objects and arrays. So yeah, there definitely were some things in here I didn't actually know. What were some things like this? I haven't used the square root thing before in math, the math object. What other ones did I not know? I think that's mostly it. But yeah, I think there was something else in here I don't remember. But anyhow, all that to say, table 4. I didn't know this either. No, was that it? Yeah, I didn't know what this thing did, so I'd never used that either. So that probably means I have a gap in my knowledge in that area. So that's something I want to go back to. But again, like, you don't need to know this kind of stuff, like be able to do this right off the bat when you're literally first learning about objects and arrays. So I'm going to skip over that. And if you want to look at it, you're welcome to. Really what they're trying to say is that each of these things, objects and arrays, they have different like methods available to them. We talked about that last time. In fact, if I come back over here, you'll remember that we can have a method associated with an object, and everything in JavaScript eventually is an object. And anytime you have a function as part of an object, we call it a method. So it's just a way to reference and to name the thing. So that's what we have here. By the way, let me know if you do have audio issues. I'm seeing nothing. I'm seeing a couple of people say hi, but it would be, especially since I've had some issues recently, it'd be nice to know that things are working out okay. Okay, so let's look at a couple things here, and we'll start with array loops. We've already looked at this kind of thing in the past where you can loop over things with this like let I equals, and this kind of compresses a lot of the logic for the loop in one single section, as opposed to like a while do loop or something like that. Usually people use for loops for this. But with arrays in particular, but also you can get them out of objects, there are ways that you can like loop through stuff. Hey, welcome. Hey, car lover. Yeah, sorry, I answered that right before the stream like formally started. So I'll let you go back and listen to that. But basically, I just feel lucky and I got to know the owner. That's the gist. So this kind of loop is common in classical JavaScript, going over arrays one at a time, is something that comes up a lot. So you often have to go over an array, and for each item in the array, you have to do something. So instead of you having to write this every time, the language said, why don't we just bake that in? So that's what they did. So there are a bunch of ways to do that. One of them is to use the for of loop, which is becoming more and more my preference. And then there are a bunch of methods as well. So let's look at this first of all. All we're doing is saying for, and then we define a constant right here. And then we're saying of each item in whatever thing we're looping over. So let's come back over this way. We've got bananas, muffins, and let's say like strawberries. All right, so now I can take each of these items and I can say for each item in here, and I can do this a few different ways. So again, we saw already, if I jump back over here, you could do this kind of for let thing, right? So the classic for loop, you could say let, I don't know. Yeah, so we'll just start with, I guess we're gonna have to iterate. So this is like for each item in it. So we're looping over each of these items. In this case, we're like incrementing or decrementing or whatever. So you could do like let I equals 0, and then you then kind of, remember these are the 3 stages. We looked at this before. This is the constant you're defining that you're looping over. Then you have some kind of evaluative statement. So as long as I is less than something. So in this case, I would always be as long as it's, as long as I is greater than the food dot length. All right, the food is the actual array we're passing in. And then finally, we're just going to increment I, so I plus plus. Well, all this is saying is each time, do something for each item in the array. And then I'm just going to do something for each of those items. So I could say like console log, or we're going to say like my, then we'll say whatever the item is. In this case, it'd be I dot, or I guess it would just be the I itself, okay? So now every time I go through this, let's see if it'll actually run it for me. Maybe I messed something up there, but anyhow, basically we're going to iterate each time. Oh yeah, I have the I plus plus, maybe I did that right. I messed something up. Anyhow, the point is like we're doing this, all this verbose stuff, which I don't typically like to do because it's just kind of complex unnecessarily. So instead what I like to do is I'd like to come over here and just name this. So we say something let, I don't know, F for food of foods. Of foods. So you see how what we're doing now at this point is we're using a for loop and just kind of compressing this a little bit more. Call this foods. All right, so for each item in here, now I can just name this F because that's what it is. I don't have to do this increment thing. It's just going to say my bananas, my muffins, my strawberries. I don't know what I messed up earlier. I wasn't, obviously I messed up something simple. I don't use the like for, the classic for loop a lot just because it's like overly complex when you're working with arrays. When you're not working with arrays, it can be helpful. But with an array, it's a lot easier just to define the name of the item you're going through internally inside this scope. And we talked about scope some, but it's this block right here. So inside this block, each item will be called F as I loop through it. So we can actually count that if we want to too. So let's console, man, why is this thing in my way? Console.log. Okay. We're going to say like, let's come outside of here actually. Let's have a let n equals 0. And so inside here, we're just going to console log what n is, and then we're going to n plus plus it, just to kind of see. So you can see this is the first loop through, it's my bananas. The second time we loop through, which is 1, again, we're 0 indexing, just like we would in JavaScript arrays. We go to my bananas. The third time through, we do my strawberries. And this shows us kind of which item we're on in that loop. So, all right, anyhow, this is way simpler than writing out the for of all this kind of stuff when you're working with arrays. So there's a simplified way, and that's what they're showing you here. Awesome. Awesome, Carl. Yep. Glad to hear it. And that must mean the audio is also working, which is good to know. So this uses the word of after its variable definition. This loops over items. It also allows you to do other stuff like you can do async await and other stuff like that, which we haven't talked about yet. All right, so this is a very nested item here, but you'll notice that we're using a couple of different arrays. So they're using like, they're going to use a for of loop, and then inside that for of loop, there's another for of loop. Then we've got an if loop, and then there's a couple of these methods on here that we haven't looked at yet, or So here we have, does it include something that's built in here to the individual events, the items, and those are strings. We have a push, which is a method that takes something and adds it to an array, which we can see right here. So they're really just trying to get you familiar with different methods that are available to you. And then they're going to use this to like build this whole function that tells you, or this whole thing that tells you the correlation between items. Again, I think it's more about math at this point than it really is about JavaScript. So I'm going to skip past some of that and kind of focus on the core ideas I think you need to know at this stage. This table 4, that's the thing. Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier, that I was like, I don't think I've used that before. Okay, so let's kind of skip past all this, and I want to pay attention to a couple of other items. And this is really what the point is. They want to introduce you to some object-related concepts. So we saw push and pop, which we looked at very briefly, so I'll go back to those, which add and remove elements from the end of an array early in this chapter. The corresponding methods are unshift and shift. So all they're trying to do is say, like, how do you get stuff in and out of an array? And there are a bunch of ways to do that. So let's come over here. We're going to take foods, and we could just pop. And if we do that, oops, yeah, like that. Oh, food. It's yelling at me. It's okay. Deal with it. Let's console log this. Actually, let's just console log food down here. So we'll console.log foods. And you can see here that now at this stage, we only have 2 items left because we popped off the last one. That's what the pop method does. And if I come over here, you'll notice it still exists because, again, JavaScript runs top to bottom. When I get down to that section, suddenly it's no longer there. So we can also do other things. So instead we could push something on it. So we could do like, I don't know, like blueberries. And now notice this one has strawberries and this next one has blueberries. Where am I getting these things from? Well, this is from Console Ninja, which is one of the things I'm giving away if you give to my donation. So, and then this down here is also coming from Quokka.js. So I don't even have to console log this, I think. Maybe I do, I don't remember. But anyhow, so I can push and I can pop, right? The other thing they're saying you can do is you can unshift. So I can unshift here, and you'll notice that I pass items, and it inserts items to the start of the array. So pushing puts it on the end of the array. Unshifting would put it on the beginning. So if I came in here and said blueberries right here, then you'll notice it's at the front of the array, right? And then you also have shift like this. And this removes things from the front of the array. So now bananas is gone, and it's just muffins and strawberries. So all they're doing is showing you different things that exist automatically already on an array. Now, this happens because of what's called the prototype. We talked about this a little bit last time, but JavaScript basically identifies this as an array and then adds a bunch of methods automatically to it. That's probably a little oversimplified, but you can see that by doing this dot notation. All these things come built in. Anytime you have a box here in VS Code, this tells you it's a function, it's a method. And then anytime you have this like kind of squattier box, it's a property. So it's a static thing like length. It's not going to change, right? And if it does change, then the next time you call it, you'll see it. But it's not like you're passing something to it or that kind of thing. Now this prototype happens right over here. If I look at an array, hey, nice fuzzy, thanks. Console.log. Or actually, what do I have? Like array. Let me copy this over just so I don't have to retype this. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got this array, and if I do dot, you'll notice I get all this other stuff in here. Same thing we just saw a second ago, but I also get this like proto thing right here. This thing actually has all these stuffs built into it. Now, the point here is that these items are always connected to an array. These are part of their that are built into the system, built into the browser. So I've got at, concat, constructor, copy within, entries, every, fill. All this stuff is built into an array right here. Filter, find index. You won't always need all of these, but there are times you need these. I don't know that I've always used every single one of these, but I've used a lot of these. Like I don't think I've used reduce right before. Maybe I have. Definitely use reduce, reverse, unshift, slice, or shift, slice, sum, sort, splice. You use a lot of these. To local string, to reversed, to splice, to string, unshift. Pretty much all these you'll use at some point. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So you need to learn these things so that you know what's on an array. Now, there are things on other items as well. You might remember we had like a const num equals, sure. Oops. equals, there we go. All right, so we have a number as well. So grab the prototype here. And this tells us everything on the number. Now notice this is a capital number. It says, hey, I know this is a number, so I'm going to always attach all these things to it. Constructor, to exponential, to fixed, to local string, to precision, to string value of. A lot of these you'll use a lot. The same thing on strings. So we'll say like my string, and we'll say Chris, that's fine. So if I say my string, and then we'll do prototype. So let's look at the prototype and see the big mama string here. It says all these things are available with a string. And because this is a string, we're going to also let these things be available for you. It inherits all those from kind of its parent. Anchor, at, big, blank, bold, all this kind of stuff. All this exists on a string. A lot more here on a string. And you'll learn basically how to use these things. So the first thing to ask whenever you have any kind of data, like a string or a number or a Boolean or an array or an object, is like, hey, I want to do this thing. Does JavaScript have it built in? And that's really the pattern they're trying to get you to think about. Here, you're going to say, hey, I have an array and I want to add things to it. Does JavaScript have that built in? Yes, it does. It's called push. You might say, well, I have this thing and I want to shift it. Now, shifting adds things or removes things to the start of the array. Shift would removes things from the start, I think. Yeah. I always get unshift and shift messed up. No, I think it adds something. No, it removes something. Let's just see what it does. Is this play? I know I just did it 2 seconds ago, but now I have to figure it out. Where are we at? Shift? Yeah. Shift removes things from the start of the array. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so it's removing something from the start of the array. So whenever you're asking a question like, I want to do this with this data, the first thing to ask is, does JavaScript build this in automatically? And if it does, then use the built-in thing, right? Don't write your own program to do that. Unshift, we're going to add things to the beginning of an array using task. The task that's passed in, okay? So that's all they're trying to get you to see here. Notice index of, last index of, we saw those really briefly too in the prototype. So with an array, it has these things already built in. So when you want to know the index of, what index is number 2 in? Well, the first one is the one it'll return, and you'll see it returns number 1 because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it says the first 2 I found is in spot number 1. The second in the array. And here you'll see if you want the last index of 2, the last time you reference 2, then it says, oh, it's a number 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's all it's doing, is it's saying, hey, use these built-in methods. And they're trying to give you an example so that you can use them realistically. I'm going to show you some other ones. Now there's other ones here, slice and splice. Slice is the one that looks like they're wanting to show you. That's fine. It's called slice. It takes the start and end indices and then returns an array that has only elements between them. So you can start and then give it an end, and it will only return the ones in between them. So I gave it a start, 0, 1, 2. So start with this one. And then 3 is the one I wanted to end with, and it's inclusive, right? The index exclusive, yeah. So 4 is, it won't include, but 2 it will include, which is kind of confusing, but that's what it is. Usually, for me at least, oftentimes I'm not picking like a range. I just want everything basically starting with this all the way to the end. And that's what you get with slice. If you only pass on the first item, it assumes you want to go all the way to the end. So here I'm saying give me 2 all the way to the end and basically get rid of these first 2. We'll talk a little bit about slice here in a second. Okay, cool. Concat is another one they're trying to show you. Again, I'm not going to go through all these. This combines 2 arrays. They're just trying to show you different items. And I actually have a practice thing that I pulled up that I want to go over if we have time. So every time the built-in kind of functionality we need to think about is every time you want to do something with an array or an object or a string, see how they're getting into this now, you need to first ask, does JavaScript build this in? Or do I need to build it myself? Now, the truth is you can rebuild any of these yourself. You can write a function that takes in an array and takes in an item and adds one thing to that array. You could do that. But if it's built in, why would you, right? And these are built in a way that's usually very performant. And maybe the way you would think to do it isn't. All right, strings and their properties. We just looked at those. Strings here, we have Kim and we have age. Let's see, we can read properties like length and to uppercase. It's just showing you different items. We have slice is available, index of is available on a string. Again, they're just trying to show you which things are available. index of both of these things. Again, on a string, it can find that. Oops, did I just click previous chapter? No, okay. Zero pad function. We kind of skipped over this last time, but you can basically pad things with zeros. So whenever you see like 006 or 001 or whatever, they're padding the start of it with this many zeros if there need to be. Now, if this string over here happened to be like 16 and we play it again, it's only going to add 1 0. And if it happens to be like 116, then it'll add 0 zeros. It's just saying if I don't have at least that many values, then add some zeros in front of it. Again, the important thing is not to know all the names of all these things. You'll get to learn them as you use them, and sometimes you'll still have to go look them up. The important thing is just to know that they exist. Every single item, every type of data in JavaScript and most languages, they have built-in ways of working with them. And usually you start with those, and then you only build your own custom things as you need to. Like there's this repeat method where you can say la, la, la. That can be helpful depending on what you're kind of working through. There's a length. There's grabbing the item in the string. Now, this is maybe a little bit weird because you're like, wait, this isn't an array. How can I pick off an item? Well, as JavaScript reads this, it can basically say, let me get the item in this. It can kind of break that off. In fact, there's a way to do this to from a string. So I could just come down here. I could say console.log, and I can take the string dot split. And I'm going to split it on nothing. That's not right. What's that thing called? Not called split. Yeah, it is. Okay, split. And so you see how it's breaking it up into its items. So that's basically what this does. It first splits it up, and then it says, let me get which item it is. It's the second item, number 1 space. So it'll return that back to you. So we're going to look at objects and arrays and different methods that are available in just a second if I get through the rest of this in time. Speaking of REST, the REST parameters. Sometimes you just want to say, hey, everything that I passed in, just, pass it on to this function. So it can be useful for a function to accept any number of arguments. So sometimes this would be 1 argument, sometimes it would be 3 arguments, 10, whatever. The math max computes the maximum of all the arguments it's given. So instead of writing these each, passing them in, I can just basically say, hey, I'm going to write this little function here. And this is basically what it's going to do. It's going to loop through each of these and return the result. Well, here, instead of passing in like the first number, like I could write this like this. I could say like first, then the second number, then the third number, then the fourth number. But what happens if I add a 5th number? Then I have to add a 5th number. So what they're just saying is every number that's passed in, I want you to just group those things into like a group and then work through them, right? So when it's called a REST parameter. It has to be at the last item passed in typically. So sometimes you'll have like a function here might take like is fuzzy or something, all right? And then the REST parameter. So every time you have a REST parameter, first put in all the items that you know are named, and then the rest will come. This is usually like the first time you usually start interacting with this is like React or other frameworks where you're passing along a bunch of things to a function. So you don't really need to pay super close attention to this if you're this early on in JavaScript. Just note that like there are ways to basically just say, hey, everything I've given you, take all that. So this spreads out the array into function call, passing its elements as separate arguments. So each of these items will come. It's possible to include an array like that along with other arguments like this. And you'll notice because max takes multiple numbers, we have one number that's stated here, whatever number's in between, and then this number here. Typically, the rest always comes at the end, like I mentioned earlier. It's fuzzy, I know, right? Square bracket array notation similarly allows triple dot spread operators. So I can take in the words here and spread them here. There's also ways to copy arrays like this. So anyhow, all that to say, you may see these ... thing. It doesn't mean somebody's thinking. It means that they're taking in an object or an array and they're putting it into another object or array, typically. So here's an object being put into another object where they're spreading in these coordinates, and then you have 2 more. All right, a few times we've interacted with this whole math thing. What is math? Well, it's a utility function that's built into JavaScript, or a bunch of utility functions, frankly. So like max or min or square root. So this math object is used as a container to group a bunch of related functionality. It's built into JavaScript. So it provides a namespace so that all these functions and values don't have to be global. You can reference math as a global thing and then pick off the properties you want. Otherwise, max would just be living at the top of the file in kind of JavaScript terms. So just like over here, you see we had Chris, and these are not globally spaced. If I come in here and say console log age, it's going to say I don't know an age. There's no age. Age lives inside of Chris. So Chris.age, now it knows what age is. It's 12, okay? Same thing happens with math. So we have like a max function, but if I do this, it says max isn't defined. However, math.max, like this, and then I pass like 1 and 2, that is defined and it can actually evaluate it here. So math is kind of the global object that JavaScript adds, and all these different methods, like here, does stuff. This would be max and min and all this stuff live on the math object. And that's built into JavaScript because you have to do math a lot. So not all the time, but sometimes. So don't run if you don't like math. And so all these things are kind of tied to that. So you have things like cosine and sine and tangent as well. All these things live, the number pi, all this kind of stuff. So math.pi. So anytime you have to do functionality that involves math, you shouldn't be writing that yourself. You don't have to be like, let me do a calculation of cosine. Like it's part of it. It knows how to work with it. You just have to pass it the right items it needs. So here they're just walking through, like here's a math.floor, here's a math.random. All these things are connected to this. And again, the important thing at this stage in your journey is not memorizing all of these. It's just knowing anytime I work with math, I want to figure out if this exists already on the math object. That's kind of part of JavaScript. So you have like a math.seal for sealing, math.round. You'll use floor a lot as well. So just a note, absolute as well. It takes the absolute value of a number. So math is another thing that exists. That's not really like it's a namespace. That's not really like a value, right? But it's like, hey, let's group a bunch of functions they might need for math things all in one thing called math. And so it's really nice to be able to just pick off what you need. All right, destructuring. So whatever this mess is, this is their whole like math related item where they're like square rooting all these tables. Now, these like complex like nested arrays are super important, especially when you're learning more like logic puzzles in JavaScript. But right now, I just think it's kind of complex, overly complex for what you need to do. So I want to skip past this and pay attention to destructuring. So you'll notice here they have like weird curly brackets right here. And they're like, have all this stuff here. And when you console log the name, which is this, it gives you this. So what's going on here? Well, if I come back over here, let's write a little function. Yeah, okay, so we've got is name and cool. We've returned an object with these two things, but maybe let's change this. No, that'll work. Okay, so we have is name and cool. So these are the two things we're getting back. And it's going to return an object. So if I do transform my name, do I have that somewhere down here? No. Okay, so we're going to do console.log. We'll do transform my name, and I'll pass it Chris. Now, when I get this, I get back an object of is cool and my name. So I get two items back. And I know that because if I come up here, this is what we expect. And remember, we wrapped this block because it's an object we're returning. We wrapped it in parentheses because otherwise this would be considered a function block. But right inside here, I have two items I'm getting back. So instead of just saying like, first, let me get this thing back. Because normally what you would do is you would take this and you would say like const, like transform name result or something like that. Then you would pass it this. And then off of that, you would say, okay, now all I want to do is I want to grab, let's see if I can do this, transform name result. And I want to grab off just the is cool property or just the my name property. Let's just grab the my name. Okay, it's Chris. So you have to kind of like repeat this multiple times. You have to name it here. Well, if you know you get things back as an object, you can just write the object right here and just pick off the items you want. So I can say like, let me see. Oh, my name, that's what I want. And then what else do I have? Oh, I have is cool. Let me grab that as well. So both of these, VS Code here knows what you're getting back here. So that's why it's giving me those when I do option and spacebar, which is a nice little tip, by the way. And now I can just reference it directly kind of at the top level. So this is called destructuring. When you say, I know I'm getting an object back or an array back, let me just get those items back. You might also like, let's do like my array function or something. I don't know. We're not going to pass anything into this one, but let's say that this function implicitly returns like 0, 1, 2, something like that. All right, so I know I'm going to get, actually, let's change these because they'll be confusing otherwise. So we'll say Chris because I'm going to reference them by their number. John and, I don't know, Greg or something. Okay, so I get all these things here. Let's get rid of this. I can do the same kind of thing I did here, but with this array. So here I'll say const, and I know I'm going to get back several items. So I could just say, give me the first item, the second item, and the third item, or the first item, second item, third item. Can't talk and do it at the same time from my array function like this. Now you might be like, well, array element destruction patterning expected. I'm not getting this back. What's going on here? Well, oops. Here, oops. Here, I know I'm going to get back different items, but I need to actually, oops. What am I messing up here? Let's come back over here. Let's see if they talk. How do I do this? And it's been a while since I've done this, but this is not hard. You should be able to just pick off the individual items that I get back here. So like get items. Let's see what this says. So I should be able to console.log, get items, and I just get back those items. You can just pick them off like this. What am I messing up here? Array element destructuring pattern. Oh, what am I doing wrong here? It's been a while since I've done it in this context. First student. Oh, you have to give them a name. That's all. Usually you do it within like a method. So it's like been a while since I've just picked it off like this. But yeah, so you'd have to say like first, second, and like third. So you're going to name these things as they come back, and then you get back the first here. So, or you'd say, give me the second item. Now you can name these whatever you want. So like this could be, this could be like pizza, and that's fine too. It doesn't really matter. You're just assigning them a name and the order they come back, right? Brain malfunction there. Okay. Okay, a couple other things here. They're going to talk about optional items. So sometimes you're not sure if something exists. So like up here, I obviously know what's in all this because it's visible to me, but sometimes you get this back from something else, or you write a function, you're not sure what it'll return back to you. So maybe I don't know if it has an age. So I could say like console.log, and I say Chris.age, that assumes that it exists. But let's say that age doesn't exist right here, then it's going to say undefined. Well, the other thing I can do is do this right here, where I'm just saying like, hey, if this exists, then give it back to me. And so if it does exist, it will give it back to me like this. Now, you might say, well, that gave you the same thing here or here. What's the advantage of that? Well, often you're doing things based off of this. So you're basically saying like, if this thing exists, then give me this. And so this little question mark dot says, only give me this back, if it exists, essentially. And so it won't break your program, essentially. Means when it isn't null or undefined. When it is a value, it evaluates undefined. So in other words, it won't just it won't mess up your program. If you aren't sure a given property exists or when the variable might hold, oops, I just bumped my camera, an undefined value. Okay, similar notation can be used with square brackets to access things. So here we have a string. This does not exist. This isn't a method. And then I'm saying like, hey, if this doesn't exist, then do this. I don't know that I've ever used that. It's good to know you can do it. Okay, they're going to talk about JSON, and then I think that's it. So let's look at JSON, and then we'll just go through several examples and call it a day. Because properties grasp their values rather than contain it, objects and arrays are stored in the computer's memory as sequences of bits, holding the addresses, the places in memory of their contents. And that mental model, like I've been showing, I know is not like the right way to think about it because they're talking about these things intentionally not as buckets because that can kind of mess people up, but that's how I learned, and so it's hard to break that mental model. But that's what they're trying to say here. An array, how can we check that out without giving us undefined or an error? What happens if it does not exist? If we have an error, how can we check that without giving us undefined or an error? So you really need like a context to show that in. So I think we'll see that in a couple of examples. But if not, bring that back up. Absolutely. Thanks for the question. But usually you're going to check to see if something exists with that little syntax. And if it doesn't, you're going to provide like a default or optional value. So I think we'll run into that in our examples. So yeah, and maybe Fuzzy can help you debug that while we finish the rest of this stuff here. An array with another array inside of it consists of at least one memory region for the inner array and another for the outer array, containing, among other things, a number that represents the address of the inner array. They're talking about the previous example they've been showing off. So sometimes you want to save data in a file, and you can send over like a bunch of memory, but usually you save that in what's called JSON, JavaScript object notation. And most of the web runs off JSON. You're passing JSON back and forth with API requests, and it looks like this. It looks like an object, right? Except there's a couple weird things, like you have to always name them with strings in quotation marks. They can't have trailing zeros, stuff like that. There is a JavaScript or JSON 5 or whatever it is that allows you to not have some of these weird things, but I don't know if it'll ever take hold because so much of the web is already built on kind of existing JSON. Okay. So JavaScript gives us functions to parse and data to and from this format. The first takes JavaScript value and returns JSON encoded string. So the two things you have to know is stringify, which takes an object and turns it into a string like this, but it's a string that can then be converted back to an object using JSON.parse. So JSON.stringify and JSON.parse. Now, what is this JSON thing? Same kind of thing we looked at with math, right? It's this object that lives, this object or this space that lives in JavaScript that holds all the different items you might need. The function here being stringify and parse. So this can take a string that is a stringified object and turn it back into a JavaScript object that you can work with. Okay. All right, cool. And I just saw Fuzzy in Absolute chatting, and I think maybe I misunderstood what was going on here. If we have something, and I think this is what they're talking over. Let me just double check. Yeah. Okay, so let's say like they're expecting something like an object A. So if I come inside here, at least this is my understanding of what they're talking about. They're saying like, does A exist? Like that should return undefined. But I could do this, like this, and I could assign it something like 42. And now if I come down here and I check to see object A, because we console logged that, it's not going to help us out. So we need to actually do this like that. Let's see, what broke? I'm not sure why this thing is breaking on me. Anyhow, they're working it out, and I guess I'll let you work out with them since Quokka's dying on me. But yeah, it would. You can basically assign stuff. We looked at that before, and then you can first check to see if something exists, and then you can assign something. If it doesn't, there's actually some new operators in JavaScript that allow you to do that. They're called, what is that thing called? There's the nullish coalescing operator, which checks to see if something exists, and if it doesn't, it kind of gives you default. That's a little bit oversimplified, but you can also do an assignment operator where you first check to see if something exists, and if it doesn't, then you assign it immediately in kind of one flow, but normally you have to actually check first. If, like in this case, Chris doesn't contain like A, and I assign this to something like 42, then if I console log Chris.A, then now it equals 42 because I've added this here. But I think what you're asking is if it doesn't exist and then I add 42, this doesn't work, right? You have to actually do like an assignment operator where, let's see, you're saying Chris A, I think this is right. If this doesn't exist, then you assign it 42. No, I forget what that assignment operator is. I just did a video on it, but I know it exists in JavaScript, and that's half the battle. Is like, what can I do? And then you do the thing, all right? So we've looked at arrays and we've looked at objects. I actually don't know what these things are down here. I created a bunch of examples of like functions if you want to start practicing with these things. So I wanted to talk about those. So let me do that instead of looking at their examples. But these vanilla JavaScript challenges, you can look at arrays, you can look at objects. So these are the two things, and they just help you work with the different methods available. So for instance, let's take these arrays, and let me see. I guess we're on the blank one. So let me grab here. Okay, so let's grab this, and I'm going to replace all this here with this. So we've got these peeps, all right? So these people, they all have IDs, names, ages, favorite numbers, that kind of stuff, okay? So let's come over here, and then we're going to get these tests to do stuff on, right? And then at the end, we've got console log peeps, all right? So let's come over here, And I'm going to take all this stuff and do it like that. Okay, so first we want to add a Boolean property is awesome for each peep and set it to true if the person has at least 3 favorite numbers. So you can see how we're doing like some logic in here. And down here, you see I'm console logging this whole thing, and it gives me this in a nice table because I'm using the console.table method. Okay, so all I want to do is add a Boolean property is awesome for each peep and set it to true if the person has at least 3 favorite numbers. So what I need to do is loop through the entire array. So we've got a couple methods that we could use, but let's use our for loop since that's what we've already kind of been doing stuff with. So we're going to say for each of these items in this thing, we're going to do something if they don't exist or whatever. So we're going to say for const, and we'll just name this like p for person of peeps, right? That's the method, or that's the way we write this, the syntax. And we could, of course, do like the for let I equal 0 and all that kind of stuff, but this is way shorter and more compressed. So I much prefer the for of method, which is the one I usually use if I'm looping over items like this. You can also do for each method. Sorry, it's not a for of method in the formal sense, the for of way of doing things. There is a method called for each that you can also use, but I've tended to go more for this for of recently. So all we're going to do is check if each person here has at least 3 favorite numbers. So I have this favorite numbers item here. So I can say p dot, and notice VS Code knows what these things are, favorite numbers. If this is, let's just say greater than 2, right? So anything greater than 2. If this is the case, then I want to do something. Now we can do this in 2 methods. We can use the if this, then that. That's fine. The other thing we could do is use a ternary. And we looked at that earlier. It's this kind of weird syntax where you say, if this is true, then like do this, whatever this happens to be, like do A, otherwise do B, right? So we could do that, except in this case, we only care if it actually is there. And there's a shorthand for that too. We learned it. It's this double ampersand. So if P, favorite numbers, is greater than 2, then I want to do something. So only when this condition is met will the second half be done. And all I want to do is add is awesome, right? So p dot is awesome. We're going to set this equal to true. Can I do this all in one line? I guess I might have to do this in an if loop. So yeah, I think I do because it's an actual statement. I think. Fuzzy can correct me if I'm wrong there. So now if I come down here and we console log peeps, which I did, you'll notice let me just do it right here. Oops. Now at this point, they should have, they're not, oh, it's because this doesn't, all right. I'm not altering the original array here. This is a copy of the array, so I wasn't thinking, so I do need to use something like math, or like map. So this is a method we haven't looked at yet. I was trying to avoid doing that, but when you're using the for of, you're taking a copy of that array and doing things to it. I'm not modifying the original array. So we talked about modifying stuff. I forget the mutability or immutability. When we're using the for of loop, it makes a copy, just like the for let I equals plus plus makes a copy. But there are things you can do that work off the original array. So what I would have to do is take peeps dot, and then one of those methods is called map. And map does the same kind of thing. It just says for each item in this array, do this thing to the actual array itself. So I would take p, and then I would do this little arrow function thing, right? And here I'd have to, oh man, now I got to redo it again. So if favorite numbers is greater than, greater than 2, then I want to take p dot, well, that's where I can do this, equals true. And again, because this is going to need to go in a if statement like this, same kind of thing. If I can do it. Okay, cool. Favorite numbers, p dot favorite numbers, sorry. All right, then it'll add is awesome equals true to each of those items. And this should actually, let's see if it'll, why isn't it showing me this thing here? Why is this thing not showing me? Oh. I don't know why this isn't showing me this. I think you should be able to do this here. But what we can do is we can push it, all right? Because this is an array. So we can push this property. All right, this is just an item here. Or is this thing just messing up on me? It's very possible that... All right, let's... What happened? Okay. Let's run this and see what happens. All right, in the meantime... Let me pull this over so I can actually see what people are saying. Okay. Let me get back to kind of the earlier question. Yeah, like Fuzzy says, absolutely, you have to guard yourself first. You do the check, and then you decide what's next. Yeah, here, I think Fuzzy's suggesting I use for each. Yeah, I think I need to push into this, right, Fuzzy? I don't know. I mean, you don't do this kind of stuff a ton. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. You're basically saying, like, if this is true, then I want to add something to the array. So you should be able to use like push, and you're just going to push like is awesome into that array. I'm not sure what all this is about. What am I messing up? What is going on here? Why doesn't it like what I'm doing? You could say like is awesome equals true. I'm not sure why it's breaking on me. I don't know what I'm doing here wrong. But you should work on these challenges. Obviously, they're really easy. It's funny, like I come back to these things every like 6 months, and even though like you do this a lot in context of like a program, when it's just like these broken out scenarios, sometimes they just challenge like you're thinking about these things. So, anyhow, I'm not sure what I was doing there, but my point is that for each of these things, you've got favorite numbers. Like here you're creating a new array. Here you're sorting an array. Here you're returning something if is true. If everything is true in this like one conditional, there are methods for all these things. And that's the main thing I wanted to show you. And we'll look at some more examples here in a second. But let's look at objects as well. So same thing with objects. You're going to use the peeps array from earlier. And I give you two challenges here, easier ones and harder ones. And it's the same kind of thing. And you actually have finished items here as well. I did this 3 years ago, so it's just like you just have to keep refreshing yourself on a lot of this stuff. So you can look at the finished code if you want to. But here I give you challenges like count the number of people in the peeps array, or list the full names of people in a new array. Return true if everyone is older than 24, that kind of thing. So if I come back over here, let's see, yeah, peeps, we have an array. Fuzzy, I thought I did that, but maybe I didn't. All right. Oh, no, I didn't. You're right. So what I have to do is I have to, yeah, P is awesome equals true, which is also something I thought I did. Yeah, if I come back here, I'm pretty sure I did that. If it lets me, is awesome equals true. I'm confident I did that, but it wasn't working for some reason. Let's try to run this again and see if it gives me this. Favorite numbers. It's not showing in here, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Like I should be able to push this in here. I'm just assigning it, right? So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So let's get past that one because clearly I'm having a brain fart, which is okay. It happens. And I only have like 5 more minutes. So let's kind of see what we can do to do some more of these and actually get something done. So we want to return a new array called young peeps. We haven't looked how to do this, but here we want to take a copy of the peeps array. So we can do this with the map method. So we could say young peeps equals, and all I want to do is take the peeps and I want to loop over each of those. Peeps.map, and I want to assign them each a name. We'll call it peep. And here we're going to do, if I can type, an arrow function. And I'm just going to return an object directly off this, which means I need to wrap it in parentheses. So here what I want to do is say, oh, no, I don't. I'm going to need to do a check first. So first we're going to check to see if it the person is 25 or younger. So I'm going to say like if The p.age is 25 or younger. So if it's over 25, then I just simply want to, I have to reduce this probably. Yeah, because if I map over that, it'll be empty. All right, so this gets too complex probably for where we're at, because I wanted to use a reduce here, which is another method, but it's both complex and often usually not super performant, but sometimes you do need it. So here you'd have like the item, which we'll call P. Then you have, in fact, you can see it if you hover over this. Usually in VS Code, you see like the actual signature of the function here, where you have a previous value, the current index. This is part of the, yeah. And where you're at, the current kind of accumulator. So yeah, we'll take the looping item and then the accumulated value up until this point. So those are the only two things we really need at this point. And what we're going to say is for this personal thing, if the person is over 25 like this, we simply want to return out of here the accumulated value so far as we can loop through here. Otherwise, we want to return the ACC dot push, and we want to push in, and we're going to have the start with an array. Again, this syntax is way too complex with where we're at, but we're going to push in the person. If I can type, goodness. Oh, it's because I've selected that. Okay, there we go. This should work. Yeah, that should work. Okay, so now I should have a young peeps like this. And why is this thing yelling at me? Reduce accumulator. Oh, I switched these up, sorry. Struggling today. That's not right. It's the item first, I'm pretty sure. Okay, let's look over here. Grade yourself for each push val. If favorite number length is greater than 2. I'm getting like snippets of Fuzzy's code as we go. Yeah, this is the oh, you're right. It is the previous value here. So I want to push. Yeah, that should work. Okay, then we have my young peeps down here. What is the matter with this? It should know that this is the individual item I'm looping through. Then I'm returning the entire array. Why can't I push into this? Fallen down multiple times here, Fuzzy. Okay, so maybe this gives us a good chance to talk about AI. So sometimes you'll run against issues like this, and really, truly, like you're going to learn the most by like beating your head against the wall here. But let's say you've done this for 5-10 minutes. I'm sure it's another stupid syntax thing. It's early in the morning for me, so that's my excuse. And I need to go in 1 minute because I got to do some stuff for work in the next 30 minutes. But like let's say you beat your head against the wall for a while. Take 5 or 10 minutes, try to figure it out, look at documentation, not because like it's always the smart thing to do, but because that's how you'll ultimately kind of get it in your mind. And whenever I find like, why am I beating my head against the wall against something I definitely should know how to do at this point? Like this is a great signal as a learner. Like, okay, I've forgotten how to do this, or like my brain isn't working. Let me go rep this a few times. I don't know, like my mind goes to sports. Let's say I'm like shooting penalty kicks and soccer or football, or whatever you want to call it. And I get in a game and like I'm normally stone cold from the spot, but I just start shanking them. Like I should know how to do that, but that's my signal, right? What is it my signal to do? To go practice. And that's basically what you run into with JavaScript as well. So when you run into stuff that you don't know how to do, don't immediately default to AI. However, let's say you've done this for 5 or 10 minutes and you still can't figure it out. Then like this would be a great use case to say like, okay, let me take this and I'm going to see what's going on here. So I can hover over these things. I think it'll give me like no, it doesn't give me anything. Okay. Well, what I can do is take all this. So let's just take this and I'm going to use another AI tool. If I can get it to open, there we go. Like fix this, yeah. And I'll just paste this thing in and then it should do its thing and it'll walk me through exactly what's going on. So to fix this, you have to do 2 things. Add a Boolean property is awesome. for each of these items to true correctly. Okay, so let's look at what it does. So it says for each of these, we're going to add this, and make it equal to true. Okay, that's definitely what I should have done. Equal to or less or greater than 3, then I want to add this. Otherwise, it won't add this. This is way simpler than what I would have done. But like I needed to actually beat my head against that a little bit, and I probably should have done it more because this is not that complex. I should remember how to do this. Here, I'm not sure what I did. If age is equal to greater than 25, then we push. Okay, it's just reversed the thing. That's literally what I did. So let me now ask, like, what is different? Sure that the reduce function returns the cumulative value by adding ACC to the end of the function. Also, I did that. I already did that. What is different in your young peeps than mine? So this is where I think AI is really helpful. Is like when you're learning, you almost don't know what to ask, and you don't want to ask somebody real because you're like, this is probably stupid. So this is where you'd say like, hey, tell me the difference. What is going on? Why did you choose to do it that way? Like, then I'd say like, are there other ways to do this? And I want to just see like all the different ways to do this. Yeah, okay, it looks like you could use a filter as well. Okay, that's interesting. I could filter it off and then do this. Like, why would you choose one over the other? Which one do you think is best and why? So again, this is where I think AI really helps with learning is you beat your head for a while. And when you can't figure it out, you say, okay, let me figure out what it's doing. And then why is it choosing that method? Why not this method? Why didn't my thing work? Like that's where it's helpful. If you just get the answer, like what's the point in that? Like just let the computers do the thing then at that point. But here you say, okay, we've got filter map, we got for each and push, we got a for of loop. All right, which one is best? Preference for readability and maintainability. I would recommend the filter and the map approach. It's concise, it's expressive, it adheres to functional programming principles, which we haven't really talked about that, but that's fine. So the preference for performance is probably for each, which is a good choice. Ultimately, it kind of depends on you, but at least it's giving me like, here's some reasons why you choose one versus the other. Super, super helpful. My lines were in the wrong order. It's possible. What did I do? I returned early out of here. Yeah. So I should have done it the other way. So yeah, it's just a dumb error, right? That's at least 2 dumb errors. Both of these are really easy and dumb. And I should be able to get that first try. I think I'm going to put that down to being really early in the morning, but it's still, kind of embarrassing to mess up on something that easy, but it happens, and it's like, that's real life. If I just turn to AI immediately, I kind of lose the benefit of this. Now this sticks in my head, right? I think through the different options. Some of these I didn't even consider, like a filter. For of loop, I don't even think we tried that on this one either. So they're going to give you all these as different examples. Here, this is a little bit more verbose, right? This is an option as well. We could definitely have done that. The filter, that's actually pretty nice. That's definitely what I should have done. I don't know why I didn't think to do that because I'm just including people. It's like, this is definitely the one I would have chosen. And I mean, this one is a little bit more complex. So we're spreading in items and then adding this. And, but yeah, this one's definitely the better option here because then I'm filtering off of this anyhow, I think. I don't need to filter off this. I could have just done it directly off this. So yeah, the right way to do this is definitely to not do all this. I only want people 25 or younger. Obviously, I should use the filter. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, hopefully you're not an experienced in JavaScript and like, what is this guy doing? So all we're going to do is say like if age, is 25 is equal to or less than or equal to 25. Like this is definitely the better way to go, right? And I'm just returning these individual people. Definitely the right way to go. Way more concise than using reduce, which is just that was a really dumb method to use. I hope 3 years ago when I did this, I didn't use reduce. But sometimes your mind just goes to the wrong place. That's why we had code review with people like, why are you doing this super complex thing? Always default to the simpler of the two. So anyhow, all that to say, I put these things for you so that if you want to actually try these out yourself, hopefully your brain works better than I do. But I would encourage that. And when it comes to AI, use it more as like a mentor to help explain why certain things are certain ways instead of just saying like, I just need the answer. Because otherwise, why are we even doing this? We're wanting to do this to learn what's available, right? Not to just have AI spit out whatever answer it thinks. So anyhow, hopefully that's helpful. I'll leave the actual README here, or this JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript challenges down below. And I actually redid some of these recently too on top of that. So that's even more awesome. But anyhow, hopefully that was enjoyable. Let me remind you again that I'm doing this fundraiser. Like I said, I only have 12 people, I think, who have given. Oh, it looks like somebody else gave. Awesome. Or at least one more person gave. If you give any money, you're going to win one of these things. It ends tomorrow. And I only have now maybe 13 or 14 people who have given me their receipts. You have to just give $5 at least. And then send along your receipt. If you do at least that, you're going to win one of these because I have 37 things and only 12 or 13 people to give them away to. So I'll just return most of these to sender and let the companies know I didn't have enough people give this year. I get that this year is tough, so I don't mean that as a negative thing. But if for some reason you're like, I can give $5 and I could use Cloud, Console Ninja, then give $5, So I hope that's a big help. And I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll do Friday, I think. I leave Saturday for an event, but I think I can squeeze one in Friday. So I'll see you Friday. Thanks. Bye.